piano, of course, I can and do admire performances of Bach by the great pianists, be it Richter, be it Glenn Gould. But of course, as somebody who's spent now the better part of my life studying this at the harpsichord, I do see a great difference of discipline, and I think I'm less willing to hear performances by a pianist who has little or no conception of what the music sounds like on the harpsichord, or at least what colors are possible. And I would think of, you know, a case in point, but for the positive, say Murray Peri, who was very justly famed for his performances of Baroque music, and without feeling that he's grossly imitating what might be a harpsichord sound, I think the sensitive listener feels that he has a very good sense of proportion and scale, that, you know, fortes do not boom, pianissimi don't whisper unpredictably. You know, the music is so dense contrapuntally, and Bach did write this for the harpsichord, and I think most intelligent musicians today are, even pianists, are no longer willing to say, well, you know, if Bach had seen a Steinway, that's what he wanted. I think we're obliged to acknowledge the music such as it is. You have, on most keys, you have 3 strings per hammer. You've seen that, but you cannot disassociate the strings. They are one unit. And even if you play the una corda pedal and you end up hammering about 2 strings and touching the edge of the 3rd, nonetheless, there's 3 strings still form one cohesive unit. The harpsichord, this is nothing really of the kind. So if I'm looking at a 2-keyboard instrument of the French variety, of the Flemish variety, the instruments made in the Low Countries, or a German variety, one thing remains certain. The lower keyboard in its normal position plays one unique register of strings sounding at what we can say is the normal concert octave. The upper keyboard plays a totally separate register of strings, playing also at the concert octave. However, on most of these instruments, if I push the upper keyboard through a mechanism hinging the 2 keyboards together at the base, the lower keyboard now plays its own strings and pulls the strings of the upper keyboard. Thus I have 2 strings at one time, more sound, more juice. That's a gross oversimplification of the thing, but the upper keyboard will always only play its own strings. Never, mechanically speaking, can it borrow, as it were, the other strings. And the lower keyboard also possesses, in many cases, a 3rd set of strings, which, as I mentioned, is 1/2 the length of the others, and thus sounds at the octave. In the case of certain instruments that Bach knew at the very end of his career, and in the case of instruments which were made at the revival of the harpsichord in the 30s to the 60s, you find a 4th set of strings which sounds 1 octave lower, thus a 16-foot set of strings. That said, if you are going to look through beautiful historic instruments existing in museums here and there, you can be surprised to find that there are some wonderful instruments. They are beautiful and elaborate concert instruments that have 1 keyboard. And these also cost a great deal of money to the owners at the time. One of the great French builders who we see his finest instrument in the Vleeshuis Museum of Antwerp. So if you Google this, anybody hearing this interview, phenomenal instrument. It has just 1 keyboard, the 3 sets of strings operating on it, and the instrument is so refined and brilliant that you certainly have the impression playing it or hearing it that you're capable of creating all kinds of dynamic and you know, variations of nuance. So for once in a great blue moon, you find an instrument with 3 keyboards. And in the Baroque time, as in now, it is the rarest of all novelties.